Welcome to the DevReady Podcast. Thanks for joining me, Tom, in today's episode of the DevReady Podcast. I'll let you introduce yourself so I don't stuff anything up.
Thanks, Anthony. And look, it's a real pleasure to be on the DevReady Podcast. So I guess a little bit about myself. I've had an interesting career. I spent the majority of my career running around the world with a TV camera on my shoulder for Channel 10 and SBS TV. It exposed me to so many amazing things. It exposed me to a lot of what works and what doesn't out there in the world as far as creating change. And I got to go to some of the most amazing places around the world and unfortunately see some people in the worst situations of their life as well. At the end of 2017, I was looking for a new adventure. So I did a jump, did some media and PR for the aged care sector, and then moved into what's closer to my passion, which is around cybersecurity. So AusCyber used to be a federally funded growth industry network set up by Malcolm Turnbull. And what we did there was we really were trying to build the cybersecurity community in Australia. So we worked closely with government, the peak industry, and a lot of the cyber leaders. And for me, what that meant is building and executing events like the National Cyber Week, where we travel around the country, live stream webinars. So building a lot of that sort of storytelling and technical skill I learned in TV. Then it was off to the Stone and Chalk Group with AusCyber, where I really dove in and worked with a huge range of amazing startups. And it was incredible to see what they're doing. And also from a perspective of being kind of zoomed out and watching, it was really interesting to see a lot of people making a lot of the same mistakes and not really kind of reaching out in an environment like Stone and Chalk that was built for you to be able to have access to other ideas so you could accelerate that journey. And then there was that group that understood it. And that were the ones that really leveraged, and you just watch them just disappear off into the stratosphere. And it was amazing to help companies find their story and tell that story, get recognition and media coverage from that, and then just to go on and kind of, break the ground with their new technology. I've also had a massive fascination with generative AI. And, I was really thinking about what can this do and what can this change? And also the psychological aspects. I loved in the beginning of the Gen AI world how James Cameron had put the schema of Terminator in our head, and pretty much everyone in the first 12 months of AI defaulted to that. I think it's a really important note too, which is around the framing we view the world in. So it's very easy to leverage off ideas that when you're communicating with people. AI is my happy space. I've worked with an amazing gentleman called Isaac Enclave and Daniel Mohan, two gentlemen at 1Q Labs that have built a bunch of AI products, and they're the people that are the brains behind the AI tool. Together, we've trained a whole bunch of AI personalities. Yeah, look, it's a copywriting tool. I know there's a lot of them out there, but we do ours very differently. We do an idea analysis. Then we have an expert writer who've been trained. And then finally, we've got a expert editor and fact checker. And so what that means is when you're using Talking Brands.ai, there's no hallucinations. And essentially what it does is it takes the notes that you put in. So we ask for notes, ideas, you can voice to text, meeting transcripts are very powerful. And then what happens is it looks through for those sticky ideas and what's newsworthy and then expertly writes those. So this is one of the things that I think that AI is fantastic at. It's a controversial area. I speak on Ticker TV every week on AI. There's a lot of fun stuff that we can talk about. But at the same time, it's changing the way we work. It's changing the jobs market. And I think just to wrap up this intro, to me, if you're going for a job today, and you're competing against someone who's got AI skills, you're in trouble. You've really got to go out there and you've got to understand. And I think that I've seen this gap in the last 6 months actually grow. So people that can take GPT, for example, out of first gear. So rather than just giving an instruction, can you build, even using the AI, a complicated prompt that is going to solve your problem? And then what I feel like is I've got a line out the door of 7-year uni graduates. So people that have a high level of expertise, but not a lot of life experience, right? And so what happens is I give them instructions, right? And the quality of my instructions really matters in the context. They give me back a draft. And then what I'm able to do is edit. And so I now live in this 80-20 rule a lot of the time, which is 20% of time is focused on creativity, direction and structure and editing. 80% of the time is done drafted in AI. And so, from that equation, I'm just doing more every day. And that's an amazing change.
Yeah, and that huge shift in AI is, I'm seeing it in our business. So we've developed our own AI assisted platform for our development and consulting, which the simple way of putting, I'm trying to put myself out of a job is how I explain why that platform comes around and it's doing what we do. But yeah, the efficiency gains you can get are phenomenal. I can do 10 times the amount of work some days. And a lot of it is then reviewing with your critical thinking and having that knowledge that you've taken years to build up with the expertise and evaluating and editing it correctly. So it gives you the right output at the end of the day. But you get that draft so fast that it's ridiculous not to use it.
Yeah, I'm going to challenge you there. I don't think you're going to put yourself out of a job, right? So here's what I think we're really seeing out there. So look, and you did just describe that very loosely, but an AI tool sits as part of your product journey, really. Correct. So, at the end of the day, your high value customer interactions are always going to be around that one-to-one, that human creativity. There isn't anything in Gen AI that can replace this at all. No. And it probably never will be the case. So that is the differentiation point you can have. But what it does is it's kind of on a product journey, isn't it? It allows people to come and interact and go, I just want this online tool. I want it solved for me. Now, I've got a much more complex problem. I actually need to have a one-to-one, but I've tried this tool and now I can validate that these are the people I want to work with. So I think in a really well-designed, community ecosystem, it'll actually benefit you in the long run.
Yeah, it's definitely, the current job will cease and it'll shift to being, like you said, more customer-focused. We're having that one-on-one and then curating that content so that work is almost done for you without having to think about it. Yeah, but that definitely makes sense. I think that framing that you mentioned, that James Cameron put Terminator in everyone's mind, I think from my end, it's the Matrix. Everyone thinks of that when they think of AI as well. And that's sort of where everything's sort of moving towards with the metaverse, as you call it. But yeah, there's a huge shift happening, and I would say it's different than the Google change that happened 20 years ago, where everyone knew someone who could really Google well, and then you would ask them for things. That was a skill like you could get by in your job without having that skill, and you could do it poorly. This is completely different. It's a huge shift, I think, where there's no parallels really. You need to know how to do it or not. There's no in between.
I agree with the commentators that say this is a bigger change than the internet arriving. And for, an entrepreneur like us, for me, Jeff Bezos' words just spin in my head over and over again. When I saw the internet, I didn't know what I wanted to build, but I knew I had to build something. So generative AI is just going to sweep across the world. OpenAI, a few days ago, there was a story I was reading, and they are marking they've created a scale from 1 to 5 of what AI and the impact it will have. And so we're at 1 right now. What 5 looks like is kind of scary. And 5 is not just you and I being done out of a job. It's a corporation. So it's a generative AI being able to act in the role of a large business or corporation and do almost all of the tasks within that. And so there is no way when we reach that there isn't going to be massive transitions in our society. Who knows whether we're going for a universal unearned wage? I somehow doubt that with capitalism. But again, I think there's a real worry for businesses that aren't embracing it in some way. There's another lesson too there because, I've built a whole bunch of highly trained and constrained bots. But then what we do is we make sure that they're cyber secure because malicious code injections, people are playing with these kind of things. That's let alone the fact that people aren't setting these bots up all right. There's a great story I reported on a couple of months ago about the city of New York. They put an AI bot in for business people. They could go and prosecute it about regulations and stuff. But immediately, because they didn't set that up right and they didn't do that confirmation bias testing where you literally almost go through and you have to create a series of questions. In this, you'll say this. In this, and then what happens is it doesn't output that way and you do have to adjust it. So it basically reduced the minimum wage, said employers could take some of the tips that staff get. Yes, it was not a very, very good tool. So there's brand damage as well.
Yep.
And brand damage can destroy you as much as a cybersecurity incident or any of those kind of things. Like, it's like all that safety we have around the airline industry. And yes, people aren't necessarily dying when they have a bad cyber incident, but their lives can be destroyed. And we see that in the media.
Oh, definitely. And then especially now with the rise of the deepfakes and the commoditization of it and how easy it is to do that brand and reputation damage will just skyrocket. But there's plenty of examples where companies are just rushing to get AI into a product. The low-hanging fruit for most people is let's just put a chatbot on the website. or into our product, and then they do it quickly, don't test like you said, and you get those disastrous effects. So there was a Chevy deal in America that the bot agreed to sell a car for $2. And then one of the worst ones was the National Eating Disorder Association of America. And their chatbot was to support people that were going through that. And its advice was to go in a calorie deficit, cut the amount of meals you eat, weigh yourself frequently. So it would have just triggered and spiraled someone off going off worse. So there's AI for the sake of AI, and that's where most people are going. I think, having the chatbot, because that's the interface you have, you think, oh, how can I just put this in my system and it'll work well? But that's the worst way to approach it.
It is, and there's another thing here too, is, you can put a chatbot on the website and you can use it as part of, that, if you call it a sales funnel, however you're bringing people in, it's part of, they find your external promise, they arrive at your website, then they're able to engage. But again, this is an experience. So this is one of the things I do. I build experiences. And so as we go through these things as human beings, it's the experience that really matters to us. And so if, for example, that bot was able to engage us in a positive way, steer us exactly to the solution or the human we needed to connect very quickly, great. But then what's happened now is it's incredibly easy to put them up. People don't train them. The last one I built, when it was in its learning phase, I had my both my sons jump on and abuse it, like try and break it. Bananas, swear words, all these kind of things, but that develops a level of confidence, and we can see how that kind of works. But I think it's really, really important to understand that you're bringing a potential client along on an experience, and so what part is that playing? So, tools and tactics are easy to switch on, but they have a place in a strategy. And if you don't connect them, well, they have next to no impact.
Yeah, and I think that probably relates back to you mentioned earlier, setting the scene, and then that helps you tell the story. Look,
exactly.
Through your experience in building the startup and experience you've had before through Cyber and Stone and Chalk and your filming life, what sort of advice do you have then that you've taken at probably each of those different stages that has driven you to where you are now?
Well, I've got three things that I focus on at a very top level. Healthy mind, which I've kind of got under control, but it's never a perfect thing. Healthy body, which has been really important to me, and healthy bank account. And that's the one I'm focused on at the moment. But I think it's a great way of simplifying it down. For me, the real challenges in my life have been around my mind and my body. I'm an extreme sports nut, and in 2012, I had a bad mountain biking incident. I massively dislocated my left shoulder. They missed the fact that the labrum, or essentially the gasket between the shoulder, was torn for 12 years. So what happened through that 12 years, I dislocated my other shoulder, other accidents and damage, surfing, all that kind of stuff. And my back and my shoulder, it just got worse and worse and worse. And so I was diagnosed with chronic back pain. I was given all these drugs, Palexia. I took myself off it in a week. It just turned me into a zombie. But what happened was I was unsatisfied. And I didn't give up, and I knew that there was a better, this wasn't normal. And I think that is the key, and why I feel very, very lucky where I am today. I had surgery over 12 months ago. I've just been dealing with the fact my shoulders are rotated forward, so I was going back and training and still having back pain. Kind of pain-free now and sleeping all night. And what strikes me is that most people that I interact with haven't gone through kind of major trauma in their lives and haven't built up any skills around that. So I think, there's two books, Ego is the Enemy and The Obstacle is the Way, that have played a huge part in my life. And they're Stoicism books. And what they are is they're a whole bunch of stories from people that have faced challenges and have broken down in logical ways and used the resilience of the mind to kind of overcome them. So when I talked earlier about destination postcards, I do the same thing for myself. I write a few notes in my journal each night, which is positive self-talk. So I know a lot of people out there, the voice in the brain is always going on at you. It's a great way of combating it. And then to be able to put some goals in and bang them in your calendar, just stick them in, right? It's okay to not get there 100%, but it's never okay to not start. And so for me, I'll just read some of the notes I've got scattered around here. Break it down and do one thing at a time. This is a great one, a value proposition. So whenever I'm thinking about something, what are we doing? So, for example, I'll go Talking Brands is the AI solution for people needing instant quality copy. All right. So through filling that sentence out, I kind of go, well, hold on. I know exactly who my archetype is now. So I need to go and find several thousand of these people for my product. So again, I think it's how you kind of analyze and break these things down. There's a lot of tools I use, from quizzes and things like that, to get people engaged. And then, you know, when they come into your business, they give you a massive amount of data points about people's pain points and where you can engage and help them. Curiosity, I'd have to say, is the number one thing. And just getting up each day and grinding it out. Like, if I can move the boulder forward a little bit every day, no matter how bad I feel, then that has it has a really good impact. And lastly, the thing I don't want to do the most is the thing I do at the start of every day. And when that's done, it's just, it can be going to the gym. It can be an email you've trying to be, put off several times. It can be all sorts of things. But once you got it out of the way, two things happen. You've done the hard thing. But number two, you're building mental resilience. And I'm fascinated by the way our brains work and neuroplasticity. And so when I was in television, I learned that if you would start to visualize forward what this, going to the White House was going to be, all the challenges, everything you had to do with your equipment, all the checks. So you've gone through this once, twice, 4 or 5 times. You've created this neural pathway. What happens is, if things change, right, and a brick wall occurs, what happens is you can go around that brick wall. And I'm sure everyone's experienced that moment where they've just literally, their brain stopped working. Like, they've hit this wall. And it generally is because they haven't thought through the problem. Now, you might not have the right answer, but thinking through is the ability for you to get to that solution. So I think getting comfortable with your mind, understanding that little voice in your head isn't kind of like there for your benefit. It's actually something that you need to kind of manage. Look, I've done a lot of martial arts, Aikido, and meditation. It helps. It doesn't solve everything, but it helps. And, I think the last thing is that your brain tricks you. And people don't seem to realize that, is that your brain is always trying to get you to take an easier route.
Yep.
It's always trying to get you to take a shortcut. And this might seem like efficiency and stuff like that, but
so
if you
conserving energy.
Yeah. Well, if you sit back and think, every skill that you have, Anthony, everything like that is something that you've spent a huge amount of time and effort to build up, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that is counter to that idea that there is a shortcut. The grass is greener on the other side. So for me, as soon as my brain is going, here's an easy route or whatever, I'm literally like, no, that's not the right thing. So don't trust your brain. It tricks you all the time.
I agree with that, but I do like using the saying that if you want to get something done fast, give a job to a lazy person. And that's finding the easiest way to do something.
Give it to Gen AI now with a good prompt.
I do follow that. I don't know if it's shortcuts, but I can see quick ways to do things, not just avoiding the things I need to do, or if that makes sense.
Yeah. And look, it's not like about, so shortcuts are fantastic. Like, do not reinvent the wheel is something I'm always saying to people, right? If you're a growing business and there's 5 global businesses, well, they've got a team out there that's very likely doing a whole bunch of market research, A/B testing that you can't afford to do. Now, I'm not saying replicate that, but a quick study of what they're doing across their socials and their website will jump you right away up a level of quality and skill.
Yeah, and we tell that to our clients when we're looking at building UIs or things. It's, all right, you're spending an hour and a half talking about this screen. Go look at Uber, because they would have spent more money on the decision of that item that you're talking about than you're going to spend on your entire app. Leverage what's there and get yourself ahead. And that's, as I mentioned, that's the point of the podcast. It's how do you share your tips and advice like you have in your life lessons with others that are listening to try to get them ahead, because most people that we speak to, they think they're the only person who has ever gone through or faced the problem, and they're all the same.
Yeah, 100%. A big help for me, I don't know if you've come across them yet, is Unemployable Media. So they're up in Queensland, and essentially this is a group of guys that are highly successful entrepreneurs. At the moment, one of them is selling camping toilets, right? But it's a highly demonstrable product. And so what they talk about is all the different kind of skills and awareness you need that isn't something I've really come across anywhere else. So for me, that has been really valuable. But I'm very eclectic in how I learn. Bless you. So what I do is I I love going and reading about all the experts in the field and what they're doing, taking notes, coming away, and then forming and experimenting my own version of that.
And that's important. It's understanding what they're doing, being able to break it down and analyze it, and then what parts of that can you take away to apply to yours?
Exactly. Yeah.
And then if they're making mistakes, learn from their mistakes rather than you making them. Avoid that step if possible.
Yes. Yeah. Don't reinvent the wheel. So
and those mistakes. I'm not sorry. I was going to say that those mistakes are normally shown to the public. So it's always a bit hard to get to that level.
Yeah, and here's something I'll tell you that I really struggled with. So in TV, in the press gallery, it's a very high-performance, small-team environment. When I came back out into the rest of the world, I kind of struggled a little bit with the pace and the level of meetings. And so I always like high-performance environments. I'm a bit of a nutter. I'll work 7 days a week. I'll carve time out for my family because that is the juice that gives me the energy. But, there's plenty of time. And that's the thing is that, as you get older, you do get time poor. And if you're younger, any of the listeners are younger, well, that time you're spending on your Xbox or that time you're spending doing those other things, you do a bit of study on entrepreneurs and all that kind of thing. Well, in 20 years, you may be able to just spend all your time on your Xbox. So, it's a lesson I wish I'd kind of learned. But in saying that, life experience is important too. So, getting that kind of broad life experience. Just spinning back briefly, you were mentioning, you're advising around UX and UI. And that's the current thing we're doing with Talking Brands at the moment. And look, I know some people don't particularly like this approach, but as an entrepreneur, I use Fiverr. I use a lot of other things. And I'm working with a team in India to do the UX and UI. Simply because the cost of doing that in Australia is quite, excluding for someone like me at this level. So I think it's about what are the tools out there that are available to me. I don't just have to go down this track. One of the businesses I was working at, someone spent $100,000 on a brand refresh with an Australian company. You can create a brand for nothing now. It's what you do with that brand that's important. So it's a really interesting way. And that UX and UI part, I think, is something too. You put up an interface, and then you're not really thinking. People don't put themselves in, the kind of customer's shoes and think, well, actually, when I go through and pick an app, when I download this, here's how I walk through. And they're great markers because people are like you. Yet when you come at it and you look at it as a business tool, I want people to do this and this and this. But I tell you what, Anthony, the one thing I often find is that I often ask for, can I get, whatever social media data and your website data you've got, right? I'll dive through and I'll go, here's your top performing LinkedIn posts. Oh, we didn't realize that. Okay, and they're top performing because, you've picked organically in these ones to take your expertise and shine it as a torch onto these subjects. And so people are engaging with you because of that, not because you're telling them something or you're trying to sell them something. And that's a really, really important thing, I think, is that how we engage with other people. So we have this switch in our brain which seems to drop a blank curtain. Here's how I go and spend my time surfing the internet. And then when I'm thinking about how I want to get customers through my app, I'm not thinking the same thing about what I liked and what I didn't like. So I think, it's really important to go into that. And because at the moment, we've got a web page and through to the app, and that conversion rate is something that we're focusing on, and we're changing language and styles, and we haven't hit it right. But we A/B test, we design an experiment, we have targets out the back of that, so everything becomes a lesson. And look, you fail to learn. I've failed in quite a few businesses. I don't know if these ones are going to become, the ones that work for me, but the indications are good. But you don't learn a lot when you win.
No, you just learn one way of doing something right, not all the other possible ways or other challenges. And it is important to do that testing. And like you said, have that framing in mind to understand who your customer is, how they would think about approaching your product. And that's where that testing does come through. And it's very important. A lot of people ignore that completely when they're building, especially software products. People just jump in way too early and start developing without actually knowing what they're trying to build and who they're trying to build it for.
I think a great example. So I was at South Start in Adelaide. It's a fantastic event, for startups in Australia. And one of the things that really struck me was that I was wandering around. I'd been a mover and shaker and a deal maker to get to having an app without having to invest any money. So I'd invested a whole bunch of sweat equity, I created the idea, all the prompts, all that kind of everything like that. I'd run into people that were, one stuck in my head was a guy who had a new version of a dating app and was running around to try and find an investor to give him $100,000 to build a proof of concept. And I said to him, well, I mean, why wouldn't you spin up a GPT or at least have something to demo to people? Oh, no. And what I thought was that his failure, his success could be brilliant, but more likely his failure is going to be massive, because what he hasn't done is he hasn't gone, to your point, okay, I have an idea. Let me go and test that idea. I'm going to speak to 10 friends. Okay, then what would it look like in its most simplest form? What is the beta, right? Then we get the beta up. What is the minimal viable product? And then, I think product market fit. It's an interesting concept. You hunt for product market fit, whereas people think it's something you build. Whereas, literally you constantly reshaping, following the data, A/B testing until you find that moment with your messaging and your UX UI journey where people just flow through it. And if you find that, you've got product market fit. Until that moment, it's really just an experiment, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an experiment of you just testing to understand, all right, I think it's going to be X and it may be A. It might be completely the other side of the alphabet, but it is a long journey and you need to give it some thought initially on, all right, let's experiment and test these markets. Because you might have the right market, but your messaging is completely wrong. And that's why you don't have the fit yet. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. Like you said, you have to A/B test. And with that guy building the dating app, was he just trying to, he's probably in the mind, I just want to be a startup entrepreneur, be a tech fund, raise some money and be a tech bro, whatever it may be, and I'll go.
Yep.
But what problem is he actually solving?
I asked him that.
Yeah, and he didn't know?
No, he couldn't articulate it to me. It's an interesting thing because it is quite a challenge understanding that. But, I was just speaking to what I hope to be a client in the future a few hours ago. And one of the things is, we started off with a bit of general conversation. And then I started asking them, what's happening now? What do you do now? Then what we dove into was I started to try and get them to elicit their pain points. Which can be quite a challenge, right? But then what I wanted them to do was sit with that pain, all right, and understand it. Because if I come in, or yourself when you're selling your products, and we tell them that, well, it's just not the same thing. Whereas someone is able to kind of articulate their problem to themselves, okay, they're the ones that have shifted the context. Okay, so you can't ever do that for them. So I think it's really, really important to understand. And to be honest with you, this is something my partner at MurFin Group, Jason Morrell, who's he's a LinkedIn influencer. He's a mover and shaker in the cybersecurity industry. We met at Off Cyber, and it's together we're kind of driving this passion in MurFin Group. But he, in the 90s was doing kind of sales and marketing, filling rooms and sending people CDs, in books and things like that. Yep. So for me, I think what happened was that I'd put this schema or framing around my head of selling as a bit of a used car salesman, a bit of a dirty job. And I'd really struggled with it. And then, this year I've really started to learn that actually we sell all the time. To some degree, we're selling our stories to each other right now. We sell to our families. We sell to our friends. And so if you shift it into a journey, so you're trying to understand someone's pain points, okay, and then you're really kind of then thinking, well, I've got some solutions, but we're going to be a bit more drawn out, and I'll give you a very zoomed out way of looking at this. Then what you're able to do is kind of elicit the details you need and to kind of actually provide a solution for them. But then you're on a journey together, and it's more of a partnership than a client. And when they win, you win. And that's the kind of work I love doing, is bringing people along. But it really, there's a lot of core stuff that we run over when we're trying to get started, just because, the eye's on the prize and we haven't really broken down all the difficult bits. So I think the biggest lesson from Jason Morrell has been how to whistle up a company from nothing in 7 days to having a bank account, to having contracts ready to go. That kind of skill set allows you to then jump across different ideas and test them until you find one that is really kind of delivering for you. So, that to me as a pay-as-you-go person, most of my career was definitely an area I lacked. And I've been drinking from the fire hose for the last year. Been great fun. But there's a lot of skills that I've needed to kind of shape up really fast in order to kind of, transition into being able to speak to someone, understand the problem, understand if I've got a solution, convince them that my solution is the right one, enter into a contract, go on that journey and change the world for them. It is quite a challenge. But like I said, with these organic lead engines, we've managed to do, we use quizzes, we use information sessions, we use downloadable white papers and tip sheets. And then what you're doing in that first experience for someone, we love doing quizzes. It gives you great data points on someone, what they do like, what they don't like, especially when you've shaped it specifically around the tool you're using. Information sessions allow people to get a bit more kind of an experience, see you face to face, see what you've done. And these are those bridges people really want to cross subconsciously in order to build that relationship with you.
Yeah, having the constant touch point top of mind. But then, if you can get to the point where you can build that relationship with a client and they're no longer just a client who's serving you dollars, then like you from talking to you, can see that passion's coming through. You know you can help, you want to help, and that can shine. And that's how you can then take off and get in the right direction. Just touching on that that mindset shift, it's really, I think, going to what we said before, it's finding the product market fit for that one statement that changes it for you. So for you, you mentioned it was realizing that you're selling every day. A story that I've shared before is I never liked creating content, video or audio, because I didn't like the sound of my own voice being played back to me. And then one day, I don't know where I heard it, but it was they just mentioned that you're the only one who cares and no one else notices. Next day, I started recording videos, and I've been doing it for 6-7 years now, maybe more. So it's just, what's that product market fit for that one thing that's going to help you shift you from A to B that makes the difference? And I don't think that's an easy thing to find.
100%. That's a great story because I've had the same experience. I struggle. I spend all my time behind the camera. Yep. I struggle. It's taken me a little longer than you. So, so this year I finally, started doing our Future Secure podcast. Jason and I host with CISOs and cyber leaders, and then I also speak weekly on AI and Ticker TV. And what I was thinking was, I've got to start just sitting in front and recording this kind of stuff because it's what people love. And then when I did it, I was kind of like, shit, that was easy, actually, because I do it all the time now. So, but the hardest battle there was just in my brain, just doing it the very first time. And it is with so many things we've never done before. You do that first time. I mean, surfing's a great example, right? You see people stand up and shredding the waves in the media and stuff like that. And I got a new board for my birthday last year. I actually just caught a few waves straight into the beach and stood up on the swash. I just was kind of getting comfortable with it. I had to kind of get past my brain, which is like, nah, you want to rip it? Because everyone's watching you. And that comes back to that thing I was saying about your brain is tricking you. And I don't know if you're the same, but we all have a version of this, of walking down the street and thinking someone's judging you for what you're wearing or how you look. The funny thing is that person is probably thinking exactly the same thing, right? So it's part of the chemistry in our brain, and it's designed for us. We're not kind of used to working in societies like this, and and I think the misuse of the fight and flight response. So, I had an experience because I was always chasing danger and extreme situations in TV. That I had, and in no way do I equate this with, what, serious impacts of this have had on military veterans and other people. But I got diagnosed with PTSD, but it was an interesting reverse version. And what happened for me was that I would get stressed when things were calm. So when a high tense situation, things needed solving, Band Aceh after the tsunami or disaster zones or, things high stake, I calm down. I can clearly see everything. I'm adaptable. When those things weren't happening, I was starting to get stressed and uncomfortable. I didn't know why. And it wasn't until I kind of talked this out, I was really able to understand that and do something about it.
That was your normal state had shifted.
Basically, we all have this
in
fight
the simple
or flight.
terms.
Yeah, and what happens is that it gets misused all the time. So, we worry about a great one is people in full-time work. You think, if I lose my job, I don't know what I do. The world will end. How will I do all this? Well, everyone who gets made redundant gets another job. People that get fired get other jobs. Businesses go out of business and people get other jobs. But our brains shrink down this world and context. So I think, the number one battle is really against our brains, I think.
Yeah, and being able to use it for a way that's going to help you, not hold you back.
Yeah, that's really, really important to be able to push you forward.
Yep. And then, learning from those mistakes and hopefully getting something out of an episode like today and understanding, all right, you're not the only one that may be going through similar things or thinking the same way.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's someone's had that product market fit for that statement that just shifted them to do something different.
Yeah, empathy is just key. And if you can drive empathy, in the kind of things we're doing, is exactly what you said. I mean, the reason I'm on these kind of platforms now is that I heard stories. I've listened to other people's stories. Those books I mentioned, they have formed the mental skill set I have that keeps me above the surface 99 times out of 100. And when I sink, I've got a clear set of tools I can grab onto right away to get me above the surface quickly rather than wallowing there for a while like I used to.
Yep, and just knowing what works for you and the right way out is always key. Well, Tom, it's been a pleasure having you on. There's been a lot of different topics covered. I didn't think that half of these are going to be where we took the conversation. If anyone wants to reach out or find out more about you, how can they do that?
You can reach me at tom@MurFin, MURFIN.au, or you can find us at www.murfin.au is a website, and also Tom Finnigan, FINNIGAN, not E, is on LinkedIn as well. I'd love people to connect. I love to share stories, so please reach out and find me. And thank you so much, Anthony. It's been a real pleasure.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks.